Hello, my name is Sheila Johnson, but I write under my pen name of Sheila Donald, and I'd like to talk to you about my book, Waireka. It's a funny name, yes, because it's Maori. It's a book about New Zealand. Now, I don't know if you've been watching the current series, The Luminaries, that's on UK television at the moment, but that's about the gold rush times. And this is about the same sort of period, mid-19th century, but it's about ordinary people that farm, that build homes and houses and churches. Now, I was inspired to write this book by a relative who'd written about my great-uncle's voyage to New Zealand. Now, this was a long time ago in the mid-19th century when he went. And he went as a farmer, but he was also a builder, which was quite a useful skill in the new pioneering country. But I've changed the story a little bit. Obviously, it's fiction. And my great uncle, met a lady on the boat who was to become his wife. Now, I followed the story as if it's from her point of view. So, although they get married, the story is told from Eliza's point of view. Now, Eliza lives in Scotland, and the local Presbyterian minister and his family get asked to have a living out in Wellington, New Zealand. Now, this would happen at the time for quite a lot of Scottish ministers because it was a new country, there were new churches being built and a need for new ministers, new pastors, new Presbyterian ministers. So, the Reverend Reed is to go out to New Zealand with his family, his very young family, but of course he needs a nursemaid. And this is where Eliza comes in. She's very keen to travel. She's always wanted to travel. But actually travelling then was a huge decision. If we go to New Zealand now, we don't think anything of it. It's 24 hours in a plane, but it's doable. But then you were talking about 4 to 6 months. And if you went in one of these wonderful sailing boats, like the one in the picture, you might think it was very romantic. But actually it wasn't as romantic as we think. Firstly, you were in close proximity to the other passengers, and if you were unfortunate enough to be in steerage, which was third class, then you were in very close proximity to one another. Disease was rife, things like dysentery, scarlet fever. A lot of the young and the very old would die on the voyage, and the bodies would be dispensed over the side of the ship. So not a very nice prospect, and you were very fortunate if you actually reached your destination. But that wasn't the only thing that you had to overcome. It was also a lack of a good diet. Yes, there would be fresh food taken on at the beginning of the voyage, and the ship may have made 1 or 2 stops, but on the whole, the food would be salt meats and biscuits and fairly not very nice food, really. But worse than that, it would be a lack of water. Crazy, there was water all around you, but a bit like Coleridge's poem, water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. And that would be about right. There was very little scope for having a wash, but worse than that, drinking water had to be sweetened with lime juice and sugar to make it palatable. How awful, can you imagine that? And this would go on for months. So not a great prospect. The other thing was storms. There were terrible storms at sea. And if you're in just a sailing boat, it could easily capsize. So, things were not great. And in fact, you had to cross the Tasman Sea of Australia, which was a very precarious sea. And I'd like to read you an extract from the book about the storm. The storms began first thing in the morning, just before Christmas Day, and didn't let up for nearly a week. Eliza had never spent such a miserable Christmas before. She had heard from various people that the Tasman Sea was particularly treacherous ordinarily, but with the added pressure of a recent earthquake, nothing could have prepared her for the violent onslaught of these storms. They magnified the previous storm several times over, with the ship not only pitching and rolling this time, but tossed about like it was made of matchwood, and no competition for the waves that seemed feet high. Indeed, these storms were so violent that even the crew members were suffering from seasickness. Holed up in their cabin, Eliza and the children were sick until they were no longer able to be, and then just lay on their beds feeling like death. "Will the storm stop soon?" Lizzie complained Maria on the third day. "I'm sure it will, dearie," said Eliza, with much more conviction than she felt. It was hard to comfort the children when she herself felt comfortless. She kept her thoughts to herself, however, and dared not tell the children that she feared for their very lives, and could not now imagine ever seeing the coast of New Zealand. But fortunately for us, or there wouldn't be a story, she does reach New Zealand. So I'd just like to read to you the last extract about them reaching New Zealand. It was with immense relief that Eliza finally saw the first land come into view just a day later, the first since leaving Australia. She couldn't wait to feel her feet on dry land again, and was anxious to explore the new country that she had heard so much about, the country she felt she might never live to see. The 4.5 months they had been at sea suddenly seemed like a long time. The January sun felt warm and reassuring on her face, promising better times, as the ship slowly made its way towards the small harbour. However, as they neared the harbour entrance, Eliza was alarmed at how narrow it seemed, making it difficult for their vessel to navigate, and it took several attempts before they were finally able to draw into the walls of the harbour. She breathed a sigh of relief when they got the all clear to let down their anchor, and she could finally allow herself to take in her new surroundings. She was at once surprised by the number of bush-clad hills that still surrounded the narrow harbour, a sign of rather less development than the New Zealand company had given them to believe, and she hoped that the reverence living would prove a reality and not just a distant promise. So what happens to Eliza? And does she, well, I've said she marries Alistair, but what happens? Where do they go? How do they get to their farm? These are all questions that you'll have to read the book in order to answer. Now, how do you get hold of the book? Well, firstly, you can get hold of it from me personally, and I will send it to you, but with postage and packing for £9 only. And you can find that on my website. That's www.journojohnson, that's all one word, .com. Or if you want to go via Amazon, that's UK or US, you can get it in book or Kindle form. And obviously the Kindle's quite a bit cheaper. So that's another way of getting it. But I do hope, whatever way you choose, that you would love to read the book, because it's interesting about a pioneering country and how the people came to live there, our forebears for many of us. So thank you for listening. Bye.